Hello friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's kick off today's video with a story about a family's lunch outing to their local KFC after a fun trick-or-treating event, only to witness an unsettling encounter with a group of Karens. My first encounter with a real Karen. My husband and myself decided to take our kids to lunch after a trick-or-treating event this afternoon at our local KFC. As with many places in the U.S., our town is dealing with a major work shortage, leaving almost every store or restaurant in town with little help and few workers to pick up the slack. We order our food from a sweet college girl who was literally running her butt off, taking orders at the front and running back to prepare the meals. There had to be only 3 people working the whole place. Even though they were shorthanded and working extra hard, the girl still managed to get the food out quick and was very generous with sauces and add-on things we asked for. We kindly thanked her and sat down to enjoy our food. A few minutes later, a group of 3 legit Karens, haircuts and all, walk in. They must have just left church and decided on some fried chicken to choke on after they sacrificed a small child or whatever. At first, I didn't pay much attention to them until I heard the main Karen rudely scream at the sweet girl at the counter. My family didn't really notice this, but I did. I watched the girl then run to the back, and I could hear her loudly sobbing and trying to console herself from this evil woman. The woman then proceeds to loudly curse at the other 2 girls about something the sweet girl allegedly did. The main Karen then gets on the phone with, I assume, KFC corporate and loudly speaks her disdain for this poor girl so the whole restaurant could hear. I informed my husband of what was going on, and he started to watch the whole crap show go down. Even my kids were appalled by this woman's actions. It took all we had not to jump up and grab this woman by the throat. We decided the best thing to do was go to the counter and give the poor girl cash for her troubles and loudly proclaim that she was doing an awesome job. The smile on that girl's face melted my heart. She was so beaten down by this woman, I wanted to seriously choke that woman out. The mama bear inside me was clawing to get out to defend this poor girl from this miserable old bat. The psychological wounds these people inflict are most often ignored because they aren't visible. They also don't heal. People are walking around with their souls bleeding out. This is how people end up having psychotic breaks. And our second story. No, I don't work here, but that doesn't mean I can let you do that. So a few months ago, I got back into law enforcement, where I'm now a part of a specialized tactical unit. Most of the time, we're not in standard uniform. Instead, we're in slacks, blue polos, and black tactical vests with the initials for our department on the front. See where this is going? I probably also should mention that I'm also wearing a fairly noticeable belt with my sidearm, radio, cuffs, all the normal cop stuff. So this morning, I'm in the local location for a big box store with a very similar uniform. I'd been in the Lego aisle, which at this location backs up to the electronics section, so that it's Legos on one side and video games and glass display cases with cheap locks that are easy to pick on the other. So I'm standing there considering getting something for a friend in another state whom I may be seeing next month when a young woman walks up to me and asks if I work here. I point to the lettering on the front of my vest and politely tell her no. She apologizes and thanks me and walks down the aisle a bit. I finally decide not to get anything for my friend and turn to head out when I notice she's in the process of picking the lock on the display case, which pops off before I can even ask what she's doing. At this point, she sees me and waves before grabbing a handful of $100 games out of the case and shoving them under her shirt and starts heading for the front of the store. I decide to leave my cart and follow her. Lo and behold, she walks right past the registers and through the security scanners, which light up and start wailing. She starts walking faster, heading toward her car. I catch up to her just as she's trying to open. I detain her and I read her rights while the store manager and theft prevention officer catch up. We head back into the store where I radio for a patrol car while the manager takes care of pulling video and getting the paperwork in order. The whole time this lady's just sitting there and quiet, so I ask her what the heck was going through her head. Her reasoning was, "I didn't think you could arrest me while you're shopping." She probably also thinks cops aren't allowed to lie to you, and that if you ask them if they're a cop, they have to tell you. And our next story. Here we go. Revenge on uppity Litterbug. I live on a bohemian block in a gentrified part of town in a hipster-friendly city. Today, I was walking up the avenue in pursuit of some delicious Chinese food when I saw a young woman gluing signs to the street poles. This is a common occurrence as nearly every wall, lamppost, and bus stop are adorned with band notices, community outreach, and non sequiturs. This particular distributor was peeling off previous flyers and gluing hers in their place, except she was letting the discarded paper blow off in the wind, littering the streets. To make matters worse, there was a trash can on the corner no more than 10 feet away from her, so I walked past and reminded her and her mates that littering is doing a disservice to the neighborhood, and it's something we should all be mindful of. I pointed to the trash can and asked if she could pitch in next time, and her response was, yeah, later. Well, that just rustled my jimmies. I told her she should stop for the day because I'll be ripping down every paper she posts and placing it in the proper bin. She didn't like that. So after getting my food, I walked down the block, tearing up every paper that she posted and balled them up in the trash. As I got to my house, she noticed from across the street and yelled out, "Hey man, what's your effing problem?" And this is how the conversation went from there. Me. At the moment, litter's my problem. Hey, I'm just trying to raise awareness. You don't have to be a jerk about it. And I was just trying to raise your awareness about the trash problem in this city, and you were in fact being a jerk about it. Screw you. Who says this? Nazi! See, my case in point. I called you out, and you could have said, whoops, sorry, I'll do better next time, but you didn't. You replied in a condescending, dismissive tone, something that's quite prevalent with your generation. Now, I've made my point, and if I see you littering again, I'm going to take you to task. Again, F off and have a nice day. The look on her face warmed me up on this brisk East Coast afternoon. And our last story. I screwed the HOA for $50,000. I decided to share this story in the hopes that it may cheer a few people up and myself typing it. Small caveat that I tweaked a few details to maintain some sort of legal confidentiality, but otherwise there's no artistic license in its retelling. My husband and kids and I live in a HOA/co-op/condo type area in a jurisdiction that historically has let HOAs run wild with power. My HOA was always very Karen-y, with everything from paint colors, plants, children's sounds, and especially screening prospective buyers, tenants, and those who otherwise resided in a home in the HOA. I will skip details, but as you know, HOAs and their rules historically were to keep out the undesirables. Choose your reason for undesirable, but it usually ends up being some sort of ism or other common victims of housing discrimination, e.g. the undesirable disabled and type of families who have more than U.S. average of one or less kids per household. My spouse owns a second property in the HOA that he rents out, and what can I say? We're weird, bleeding heart liberals and rented the apartment via Section 8, which is when the government subsidizes the rent for low-income people. However, the rent subsidy is well below fair market value for the middle-class neighborhood, so Section 8 apartments are rarely encountered in such nice areas. This was the only time someone ever applied to rent with Section 8, and they allowed her because the lawyer said there was no reason to deny her as income isn't a factor here and she has no criminal record, etc. However, from that day forth, there was a campaign of harassment and violations against her, calling police, calling Section 8 to get her off the program, dozens of complaints that were ridiculous, often involving children being children or that everyone else did, or rules so strict and old from pre-Fair Housing Act law in 1970s, like children can't be outside unattended until 18. They would especially try to enforce such insanity against her and anyone else they decided they didn't like. People really hate poor people living in their community. It's insane the drama that went on. I, of course, defended what I could as the violations were aimed at my spouse, the landlord. I'm very quiet and shy, and I'm a research attorney in an extremely specific, narrow area of law. That's all I do. I analyze an extremely specific area of law, research, make written arguments based on law and fact with backup documentation. Well, one day, this nastiness started getting out of hand, and my kids got targeted, and I went mama bear. My God, I went mama bear for my kids and my tenants' kids. I didn't know I had it in me because I'm a nose and a book lawyer. As you know, HOAs leverage the power of the HOA attorney to get what they want because unless the community is rich, if the HOA attorney ever goes after you, everyone folds because attorney fees are insane for the average person. And my community has no other attorneys or rich people who'll pay $450 an hour to fight a HOA violation that's unfair and can bankrupt them. So when they sued my spouse, he didn't fold. They were surprised. Me, on the other hand, I'm a research attorney. The harassment was over several years, and as all autistic lawyers do, I saved and documented every piece of paper, email, convo, asked for clarification in writing from management for every board comment or manager comment from the day it all started. I pored over condo docs and researched the law, researched the changes in the law and the deficiencies in the HOA docs and enforcement of illegal provisions. I'm a weirdo, I know, but I have a passion for this sort of stuff, and I love to learn. That being said, I'm not a litigator. I never once have been to court or even worked at a law firm that does that type of thing. I consult on a very specific type of legal issue and apply it to client's situation, but I don't procedurally argue anything in front of a court or file papers or do procedures. I just tell other lawyers / business people / advisors, etc. my thoughts, and they do what they need with it. It was sadly hilarious because my filings were full of procedural errors, and the judge was very sympathetic because he knew I was trying my best, and I had a very valid legal argument with tons of well-organized evidence tailored to the law. But my God, there are so many rules with litigation down to the heading of a document and whether you used a magic word. I kept messing it up. But I would ignore the complaints of my amateur work and would just keep on plugging, fixing the error, trying again, getting state and federal housing agencies involved. It was getting expensive for them to keep filing motions. They got so obsessed with this, the HOA managed to get sued by 2 other people because they spent all the money on legal fees instead of, say, fixing the giant pothole or roof issue in front of someone's house the HOA is legally responsible for. So now lenders won't lend to people to buy because it's too risky due to lawsuits. People had to sell for less and value went down because only cash buyers. Non-Karens who barely know HOA exists are starting to ask questions. They're also getting subpoenaed by Fair Housing to answer questions. E.g., I'd notate that my tenants got a citation for XYZ, and I would document non-Karen also did XYZ and no violations. So now non-Karen is getting asked questions about if HOA ever cited her for the wrong type of barbecue grill allowed by docs, which of course they never did except for my tenant, who has an issue to show selective enforcement. They retaliated by threatening to call police next time my kids break a HOA rule by being a child playing outside. Retaliation for fair housing complaints is very illegal. It was documented and witnessed. I went even more mama bear to the point I scared my husband after that threat to my kids. Long story short, $50,000 in legal fees on their end, $400 in filing fees on my end, but too much of my free time, and HOA finally begged me to settle the lawsuit they started, call off the fair housing government investigators, and they'll agree to leave me alone and change the HOA docs to comply with law and stop being so Karen-y. They are terrified of me. And I've been taking advantage by breaking every small rule imaginable. Unapproved plants, no grass, unallowed umbrellas, incorrect mailbox color, free-range kids, and I ignored them. And all the other people under 50 have joined in enjoying by doing such awful things as replacing turf grass with invasive native plants and the like, now that they know how is powerless. I love hearing stories about people using the law to destroy the HOA's power and drive them crazy. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.